this is Trish, and welcome to Teacher Therapy. Today we have a very special guest named Miss M, and she is a high school career and technical education teacher who has been in the classroom for 14 years. And she is just going to tell us the truth about teaching in 2025. She's not going to hold anything back. She is just going to tell us the truth today. So, Miss M, I would love to know just a little bit more about some of the different roles you've had in the classroom.
I host art classes. I teach art. I teach computers. So I teach photography. I usually run a computer lab, like a small Mac lab with the students. I've had some experience doing printmaking exercises like lino cut. We also do painting, color mixing, acrylic, and also watercolor.
That sounds amazing. And to me, as a student, I feel like that would be so much fun and you'd be my favorite teacher and I would just love it. But has that been your experience with the modern, Gen Z student in 2025? What is that like for you?
I think there's a lot of preconceived notions about what art is. So the students aren't really sure why they would ever need a teacher. And I'm not sure if that's just part of what the culture is right now. The culture is kind of like we can, have art on an app and that's going to be good enough, right? When you get into the actual art classroom, you're dealing with like hands-on materials. You have to put down your screens. You can't have your device in one hand and try to do an acrylic painting with the other. It's very difficult. And I think there's also, I hope I'm answering your question, but I do want to mention there's this, I don't want to use the word entitlement because it sounds kind of pejorative, but it's more like this. It's a very strange way that the devices remain, and it's through music. So everybody thinks, oh, okay, well, we're going to be in the arts, we're going to be doing this thing, and it's just going to be better if all of these students can listen to music. And that's why they should have these devices, and that this just kind of makes sense. And if I was to say, like, that's not really that great, we're in a learning community and we should have our ears open, that's really just like brushed aside, I just become a wet blanket on everybody's good time. That's not fun in the classroom, when you're trying to lead the discovery, the instruction, the use of materials, and all these kinds of things. And the attention that's required to do these things safely and correctly just isn't granted. It's not seen as a serious undertaking to dive into the creative arts and creativity. And I think on some level, a lot of students, parents, other teachers, we don't really know what the arts are for. We think of it as this hugely subjective thing, but we don't see the applied mathematics. We don't see the applied physics. We don't see the soft skills inside of generating portraiture, like looking at people, looking at the world, looking at light. All of the arts is looking at the direction of the light and all of these things. And we just allow the students to do this in kind of a half distracted way because they're not testing for it. So it's not about cultivating the child's intelligence. It's kind of appeasing them for the duration of the time they're doing in this room before they can get on to the real things they need to be doing, and appeasing that. So giving them ample time to curate their own playlists, right? But then you're looking at a 45-minute block and a student just spent 20 minutes curating their playlist, and, the painting never gets done. The process of coming up with a creative idea never gets fully understood. Going from maybe a poem and figuring out how to illustrate it, that going from language into visual symbolism, that doesn't happen. So there's so much going on there to grow the mind, and that's what we're there for. We're not just there to ask to go to the bathroom, and a lot of that is like so lost. So it should be more than fun. It should be way more than fun, but it's really not.
And so, are you finding a lot of pressure from the school district or from professional development to integrate tons of technology that's incorporating the music and having the kids on devices?
Yeah, there's a lot of I've had some recent evaluations, and when I go into the school, I go in and I have aprons, I have the materials, I have 5 sinks. We're putting down a piece of paper, we're getting paints out, we're getting the water, we're getting the brushes, we're learning what strokes do what. It's very hands-on, and you have a break. You're not on a screen, you're not passively doing an app. You're sitting there with actual real life tools. So what I'm finding is some students can't handle it. So I had a class this year where the students simply couldn't handle it. And I realized with this particular cohort that they were probably about 11 or 12 when the pandemic had hit. So they had gone into isolation with their Chromebooks and tried to do this remote learning and virtual learning, but they were isolated and somewhat abandoned, and they could turn their cameras off and go and do whatever they wanted, you know? And that was happening for them when they were in their seventh and eighth grade years. So by the time they get to me, now I have them as seniors, and you can see that they never had that socialization of seventh grade to eighth grade and then eighth to ninth in a physical classroom. So when I'm looking at their behaviors and they can't handle the lack of screens in the art room where we're doing the analog artwork, like using a fine point pen to, cross hatch and stipple. That kind of meditative art experience is so difficult and challenging for them at this point because of the screen dependency, that it causes them to act out with these behaviors that you might see from a much younger student, like a 12 or 13-year-old, but we're looking at these 16 and 17-year-olds, throwing candy, throwing food snacks, hiding things in cabinets, roughhousing with each other. But it's very like middle school type stuff. It's not the more serious high school type ribbing, I guess. So it's just interesting to see that because I've always taught high school, and pre-pandemic, like the students will be quite nasty to each other with their words. They're not nice. And you tell them, hey, you should probably, like, ooh, but they'll argue with you. And then you have to make sure there's like a fine line between when you write the infraction and say, hey, this is beyond nice and I'm mandatory and alone in the room, and I have to make sure that this other student isn't, harmed. So there's immature and then there's bullying. So there's a mix of that going on. And all of those behaviors come out more and more if you give them pen and paper and no access to a screen. So for that class, I moved them into the computer lab and we started doing drawing and painting in Adobe Illustrator. And for the last half of the semester, it was much better with the behaviors. We didn't see as much throwing of things. They instead started to become competitive. They would be in competition with each other. And then they would make fun of each other, but it would be on the quality of their work and things like that. But they were engaged in the work and productive enough that I could apply some good grades to their work, because if you're just sitting there watching anime and a basketball game and throwing stuff, and playing keep away with your friend's AirPods, you're probably not doing the project, right? So I think it's nice that I was able to creatively take them into another situation because of the screen dependency and help them grow their focus by doing a specific exercise that required attention on a computer. But I would have preferred if we could have gotten them off the screens. It was better than it had been just in the room analog, but still the indication is that the students are heavily screen dependent.
That's so fascinating, and kudos to you for figuring out how to work with the kids that you have. And I'm just kind of wondering if we've moved beyond the point of no return, like if we'll never be able to go back to just pencils and paper, and if the new generation of teachers will just have to figure out how to adapt everything to screens, for better or worse. What do you think about that?
I think that there's been a huge financial investment in tech, and I did hear the term tech optimism. John Haidt was saying that in the 90s we had tech optimism, which I can remember because I was there, where we felt like it would be helpful and useful. Did we know that the tech infiltration into the schools would create a screen dependency in the children and also give them portals to entertainment streams, the likes of which none of us had ever had access to before? Really a wild, wild west of unregulated internet browsing access, in the palm of your hand. And then the kids can all figure out how to get around stuff in the Chromebooks, but sometimes they can't. Sometimes there's digital overwhelm. Sometimes they can't learn a new app, but it didn't stop the schools from continuously throwing the apps at them. Oh, like We know how to gamify learning. We're going to make it so much fun. And the way we're going to do it is by spending all of this money on all of these apps and all of these portals and all of these. I mean, the cacophony of third party for education. This is the one that's going to do it. And everyone's going to be super hyper intelligent because we have this thing. And really, it's just a mess. There's so much of it. Like, it's just confusing. And then at the end of the day, we're finding that because students haven't been using pencil and paper, there are things that their motor skills haven't been doing with the writing, the ways that the brain is actually formatted through writing. That's not happening for them when they're typing. You've got kids, first grade, second grade, third grade, fourth grade, typing, you know? Um, if there's not a concerted effort to put a pause on that flood, and to say, hey guys, like maybe the education system and our children shouldn't be the brainstorm cash cow for your product. Maybe we should look at the actual research, do what really works, and help these children because they're not being helped. Their attention spans are being purchased.
That is so true. And it kind of reminds me that teachers are in an unwinnable game. A long time ago, I used an analogy in one of my videos about how we're trying to make education, which might be akin to broccoli, and turn it into chocolate cake, and you just can't. And so what I found is even with the ed games, the kids might have been interested in it for a little while, but then since it wasn't constantly changing like TikTok or YouTube or Instagram, then they got bored with it. And so I was finding that I constantly had to try to keep finding new online games for them or new educational technology. And so even with trying to move things online, it feels like it captivates their attention for a little while, but they're quickly bored with it. And another weird irony I noticed during the pandemic is that kids that could, program games and figure out all kind of things for fun were suddenly unable to figure out how to work on Canvas or how to submit an assignment. And so I just think at the end of the day, we're trying to help with their motivation by inundating them with all of these, technological programs and all of these shiny games. But even then, they know it's not the same thing as Fortnite. It's not the same thing as TikTok. And if they're not motivated, they're just going to bring that lack of motivation to the online platforms and that learned helplessness and the complaining and the whining. The shininess of it might catch them a little bit, but then I just feel like it goes back to the beginning. So did you kind of see some of that in the art world at all?
I remember at the very beginning, I was working at a school and I noticed, like, especially with like Snapchat and all of these different apps, they were showing up. Like, I started in 2011 and the phones kind of started to come in, but I think at that time it might have been a majority of like flip phones and slide phones. The actual computers in the lab is where students would go off and do their own thing. I call that, taking your consciousness out of the room. They're skipping, they're gone. Okay. So I just thought that with all of these apps, the Snapchats and the others, the TikToks and the Instagrams, I was like, that I knew it wasn't regulated. I knew what that was. I knew that the kids were on these devices with like no supervision. And the adults were like, meh, we don't want to know. We like our crossword puzzles. We're gonna go to the garden center. Who cares what the kids are doing with this newfangled internet? And I'm like, wow, they're abandoned online. There's nobody watching. There's nobody there. So I would go on these apps and be like, how do they work? What does it look like? What are the algorithms like? How do people get popular? Around that time, World Star became very popular, and I learned about that because of the culture of the kids. They let me know. They're not that secretive. I would have to literally say, please do not discuss your crimes in front of me. That's true. I've worked with at risk kids a lot. And sometimes having that discernment for what I can say in front of a teacher, it's lost on them. They don't understand the role. They don't know that we were a government employee. They don't know that we're mandatory reporters. They have a situational comedy perspective of what a teacher is, and they go based off of that. And on some level, for them, it's funny. But it's not funny when you misbehave on Snapchat in ways that are so illegal that the police are coming to get you from the school now. So I've seen situations like that. I've seen situations where I had started to learn how to use TikTok and do the video editing. And I had already had some of this in my graphic design and animation training. But doing it on the phone and having the app and making a 3-minute video and featuring the music and using the filters and looking at the trends and chopping it up and getting different speeds for engagement. Like if you change the time signature of a video a couple seconds in, people might stay longer, things like that. So I started to make some tutorials for my art classes using TikTok because that's where the students were at and those were the formats that were capturing their interests. When I showed this, as you know, we had to do professional development and there's artifacts, like show an example of something that you did that was, interesting, cool, innovative, whatever. So I sent this video, and the feedback I got from the admin was that the students would find the music distracting. So it probably wasn't very good or useful. And then that was in, like, I don't know, 2014, 2015. I don't know what year it was, honestly. They melt. But maybe 2017 or 2018. So fast forward to today, and like TikTok songs go viral constantly, right? So I got negative feedback on something that was slightly ahead of the curve there. And that bothers me, you know, because it doesn't allow for me to grow professionally or to be viable to the building or a resource. The music is distracting. It's not good. We don't like what you've made. That kind of feedback. It isn't like, wow, this is really innovative. Have you run it past the students? What did they say? From her perspective, as maybe a Gen Xer, for her, the music was distracting. But for the Gen Z kids that were in front of us, the music will keep them looking at the art process, even if they're not hearing it, just watching it. It's why all those, like baking videos or little cooking videos, things like that, they go so quickly, so easily, and people learn how to do stuff that way. Right? So I just felt that the admin was out of touch.
That's really interesting. So it almost sounds like you see a positive place for technology with students and a negative place. Which way are you leaning more, you think, these days?
Well, I think technology is a wonderful tool, but if you're using it as an escapist, stimulating entertainment portal that doesn't really, it's not a useful process of the tech. You're not in the community. You're kind of just like passively disengaged with life while engaging with other people's content that is probably motivating you in ways that you don't even know to think things, like things, dislike things that you may or may not even agree with. But it gets to be so much that your whole mind is just saturated with all these snippets. The formatting of it will stick in the mind. So to that end, technology can be very destructive, but the technology itself is neutral. And that's something that we've known philosophically for a long time. You know, if you use a hammer to build a house or you use it to, break a window, the hammer is neutral. We could do wonderful things with technology in the arts classes. We can do speed art videos. We can record process videos. We can talk about how artists are using that to market on platforms. There's a wonderful abstract painter whose name I am forgetting, I apologize, but just recently saw one of her videos on YouTube, used it with the class as inspiration, and talked about the way that she's growing her platform and her business, being able to sell her artwork because she's engaging more people in her own process. So she's not sitting there passively neglecting her academics, while doom scrolling. So there, and I'm not even saying that it's bad to doom scroll. I'm just saying if you're being provided a free and equal public education, paid for by the taxpayer it's a misuse of time, and it's a theft. It's a theft of your education. So when I see my students doing that, you're stealing your own education. There's academic neglect involved. Now, these kids are older, and you think if you have a 17-year-old that's in the class, they're going to be 18 by the time they're walking out the door, and they've been playing video games, and they aimed for a 65 in the class, so they did as much as they could to get that 65 and then played video games the whole time. And you said, hey, don't do that. And they were like, and then you alerted other people, hey, they're doing that. They shouldn't do that. And they're like, well, they're going to do that. And then that's what they do. And you're like, okay, what? Okay.
That makes a lot of sense. And I kind of love the 80-20 rule. It just kind of depends on where people put the proportion. So I feel like if we could have 80% traditional education with pen and paper and thought and communication, and maybe 20% technology, that would be totally fine and an asset. But I think it's kind of reversed these days, and it's 80% of online technological things. But like you said, it's not being used always in a quality way. It's being used in kind of a disengaged, loophole kind of way. And, if the kids even have 20% a day of their educational process of really thinking and writing and communicating, it's kind of miraculous. And I think that that's going to be a problem in the future.
The tech is not good. It could have been good, but it's not. The tech, we already know. The social media platforms made it purposefully addictive. It's caused harms, through the roof harms. At this point, I think it would be remiss of any educator to not be railing against phones at school. The timid teachers, everyone is passing the buck. Everyone is like, we know the scores are low. We know the phones are an issue. We can see that our children are screen dependent. The screen dependency is there because they're literally filming assaulting teachers and sharing it. That's happening. That's happened, and it's happening. They are using their phones to schedule meetups and violent and criminal activities outside of the schoolhouse, draw others into the schoolhouse, and to learn nothing. Right? To really, and that's tragic. I had an assignment. I'm going to tell you, I had an assignment. It was in November. 2 goals for this class. 2 goals, One could have been like, finish my painting. And the other one could have been like, learn how to mix orange and red orange, right? What are some steps for how I'm going to do this? It's just a simple task for them to get some quick points. The students responded with wild goals that had nothing to do with the class. I'm going to get TikTok famous and audition for baddies. I'm going to get a new car. I'm going to, someone said they were just going to get moolah. There were no action steps as to how this moolah was going to arrive. I've asked a lot of the students. I said, "Have you ever taken public transportation?" They've never had jobs. They're 15, 16, 17 years old, about to graduate from our program, never have jobs. Don't really take public transport. I think that they should have a little bit more autonomy at this age, and you can see that part of their screen dependency has taken that ability to move around in the actual world away. So, and if they are moving around in the actual world, they might be doing it with their head down, right? And kind of scrolling. Now, not everybody is suffering with this, but a lot of students are. And it's actually to the point now where it's so many that I would agree with a nationwide ban of personal devices and a serious attempt to reduce tech.
Absolutely. Me too. Me too. Now, I would love to learn more about some of the behavior of the students that's been concerning, maybe defiance, just a refusal to do work. And I'm also kind of wondering what the administrative response has been like when teachers have come to them complaining about students' out of control behavior.
I think sometimes it depends on the administrator. I've never had a better administrator than my first administrator, and that was just because there was that I would say something like, hey, I noticed this thing about this individual. And that administrator understood that when I said that, if I was uttering those words, there was a reason. It wasn't arbitrary, and that that could be trusted, and that it would be in the best interest of the student. I have experienced other situations where administrators have amplified the level of behavior that I would consider to have been against me and caused more of a power struggle where there never needed to be one. And instead of supporting me, they made it easier for students to disrespect me.
I'd love to hear about that.
Well, I had one student that was falling asleep in class on a regular basis. It was a morning class, probably first period. And I was somewhat new to the school. I was teaching photography. I had a lab with 18 computers. We had cameras, lights. I mean, it was very fully functional, very nice. I was running nice lessons. There was a group of 3 students that were off to my right. They were there every day, and then I noticed one of the students was falling asleep in class frequently, so I started to write the student up for sleeping. The reason you write a student up for sleeping in class is because you have to. Students are not allowed to sleep in class, especially at the high school level. We don't have nap time. This does not exist. We can all understand that maybe somebody needs to take a rest. They can. They can't do it in class. They have to ask to go to the nurse. The nurse has a cot. You go in, you have a lay down. If you need to go home, you go home, but you don't sleep in class. So if someone is sleeping in class, you have to write an infraction because it can indicate a number of very serious issues. Every year, I have had state mandated trainings over and over and over again that highlight the importance of the expectation upon me to protect the children in my classroom, and sometimes even from their own habits, their own doings. So if a student is staying up very late because they're playing video games all the time, and they're sleeping every day, people need to know this. And if the teacher is there and they just let it slide and the student fails, you're culpable. If something worse happens, you're legally responsible. So the gravity of that position, again, I think people have a situational comedy in their mind where the reality of what we're doing in educating the children of the community is just completely lost. They think it's a joke. They think that there's some other way that the students are going to learn something, and that the classroom staff is just a very funny butt of a long-standing joke. So this girl was sleeping on a daily basis. I started to write her up, and then I went and had a meeting about it. I was called into a meeting. I was told in that meeting that the student was a good student, that she was just a little bit tired, and that, I'm kind of new to the district, and it's okay that maybe I just don't know her that well, and just to maybe not write her up as much because we don't want her to incur a bunch of disciplinary issues, right? Because she's a good student, she's okay. So I got that. But okay. The student continued to sleep in the class, and her friends that were sitting to the side of her were very whispery with her. The 3 of them were amplified in their ability to disrespect my concerns over the sleeping, or even my requests for it not to happen, or among other things, because once the student is backed and you're not, that's it. That's it. So there wasn't anything I could do except for teach everyone else. As the semester drew on, it was discovered probably in January that the student had been concealing a pregnancy. This one is a heartbreak for me, just because the student delivered her child alone, suffocated the infant, and her and her significant other were caught because they drove around and a surveillance camera saw them dropping the body into a dumpster in the neighborhood. And that girl is probably still incarcerated. And it haunts me because she was sleeping and we needed to check on it. And I did everything I could. And I was told by the same woman who told me that the music in the video was too distracting, that the student was a good student. And there's no doubt about it. Sure, she was a good student. That's not the issue. The issue is she's sleeping, and we need to know why. But to drop it, I lost a lot of faith in public education. I did not stay at that school much longer.
That's a hard story. And I do think it illustrates in so many ways the double standard that's put upon teachers. Because on the one hand, you had endless professional development about how you need to be looking out for these things. You need to be notating them. You need to be bringing it to the attention of admin. And then you do that and you go through all of this gaslighting. It becomes a joke to the students. They get to have a little huddle where they do what they want. And nobody in a million years would guess that it would turn into something so ghastly. And so it's a sad but true illustration of what teachers are going through and just the impossible position that teachers are put into every single day. And then admin can just kind of wash their hands of it and just say, oh well. And teachers are left with that for the rest of their life.
I have another story on those terms that's like it's a little lighter. Okay, so we can have a different visual. Okay, I
Yeah.
had another position where I was teaching commercial art and I was in a building and the building had the classroom and I'm in the classroom and wasps had built a tunnel into the classroom. Um, and almost on a daily basis, I would get one wasp visitor. And you should have seen me jumping up on the tables to try to spray the wasp with like Expo, like dry erase board stuff to get it on the ground so I could smush it because God forbid one of these kids gets stung by this wasp. I went into this full parental protect mode with these wasps. I can't even tell you how many times I called to be like, guys, there's wasps that we don't know. We don't know why that we called ground. We put up this, we put every day a wasp. It's baffling. You don't learn that at school, but like, what do? You gotta you gotta protect these students, And that year, something that I should mention is the drills. There's an awful lot of drills. And the year that I was at the Votech school, that community, that district, and even the nation, we were suffering bomb threats at schools, had become popular for some reason. And these bomb threats were being called in. And we would go into these very long lockdowns because of the threat of the violence. And it got to the point where one of my students had reported that at her home school, they had locked those students down for 4 hours. So we had a PD, and everybody was advised to get a shower curtain so that if we had an extended lockdown, the students would be able to use the garbage can to go to the bathroom if that should happen. So, I mean, there I am at Home Depot getting a hunter's loo for my classrooms. You don't expect that you're going to get a hunter's loo, like a bucket with a little toilet seat and a shower curtain for your classroom. But the culture that we have is there are bomb threats that come in. There are things that happen that are making teaching incredibly hostile and porous. There's no security in having a bunch of personal devices running around the room with unregulated internet and people obsessed with the entertainment value of criminal activity, right? That's what we have. And we're trying to figure out why nobody's reading.
So true. And I'm kind of curious, just kind of on the theme of feeling threatened. Have you ever felt threatened by students? Have they ever tried to intimidate you or anything like that?
Yeah, they're directly threatening now. Directly. Even just at the beginning of this year when I was introducing the classroom expectations, and I was like, these are the classroom expectations. And they're really simple. They're like, be respectful, like give attention in class, put your phone away. That one, that they immediately said, we are going to try to get you fired immediately. If you try to enforce these expectations or even have them, we are going to work to get you fired. And that's it. And we're never going to get off our devices. And we're going to try to make this bad for you. It's basically what they said. And then it's what they did. That's what they did. Yeah. They went about it.
What did they do?
They just maintained their level of disrespect at a very high level, and that can be very grating on you as you're going into work. It's hostile, and now you're suffering a lot of disrespect because you were like, "Hey guys, we have these expectations, and I think you should meet them, and I think you can," and they're like, "Well, if you try to make us, we're going to get you fired." Um, and it's not just that, it's a concentrated kind of bullying effort where the noises that they'll make in the room, the activities that they'll engage in the room, and then the "we never did that," right? And then they will go to different people in the building and try to garner favor and, say negative things about you. Um, I think they were trying to indicate to my superiors that I was mentally off, that there was something mentally wrong with me. Um, yeah.
That is shocking and horrifying. And I'm just glad that you're able to talk about it because a lot of people don't even realize it. I think a lot of times with admin, sometimes with parents, often with society, people view students in the K through 12 age range as just these angelic people that are so nice and so kind and so innocent, and they would never do anything on purpose. And I've just been so surprised when I would bring evidence to administrators, like they are literally, conducting psychological warfare against me. They are doing it together. They are planning it. They are enjoying it. They are making this an Olympic championship to mess with the teacher. They're just like, oh, I don't really think that that's it, And I get the good kid argument. Like, oh, that's a really good kid, have a really great family. And it's just like you feel so gaslighted and alone. And it's like the kids know the power they have. And a lot of times they know it because of admin. Because, when I taught eighth grade, especially, like I would enter in detentions and then the administrator would go and take the kid's detention away and say, okay, well, I know you're sorry. So I'm just going to remove that detention. And then at that point, the administrator becomes the hero to the parents and the students, and the teacher becomes the enemy. And then they're empowered that, oh, this totally worked. How far can we go? How much can we push? And once a teacher gets put in that position, I just feel like it's over because the kids they realize really quickly that nobody is backing the teacher. And I think the atmosphere of group intimidation is one of the absolute worst positions a teacher can get put in because you can feel it. Even things as small as them looking at each other and snickering, or you giving like a direction and nobody doing it. It's just those kind of scenarios are so endless and they can go on all day, day after day, and get worse and worse. And so I think people need to know about it. Teachers need to know that they're not alone. Parents need to know what their kids are capable of. And admin needs to stop gaslighting teachers when they come to them with these problems.
Well, yeah, I mean, it becomes a you problem, it's your classroom. So if you're being disrespected in your classroom by these children, it's your fault. You need to be more interesting. You need to be more friendly. You need to be more sensitive, right? It has nothing to do with the fact that you've been targeted by a legitimate group who has no academic interest, who's probably screen dependent, who's probably like they really need the education, but they're pushing it away, obviously, because yes, they're children. So instead of doing the academics, they play in the room with the teacher. That's what they're doing. And it's just a further distraction for themselves, but it doesn't help us serve them the education that they're entitled to. So we're playing these social games, these dramatic social games that don't need to be played. You have, and this is something that I said to my district. I said, listen, I didn't come to your school to learn how to teach. I've been teaching for, at that point, it was 2 years ago. So I've been teaching for 12 years. I graduated a long, long time ago, and I've been in the classroom. I said, I'm not here to learn how to teach from you. I'm here to teach for you. I'm already, your mid-level veteran here. So I think that one of the things I did this year that I really like is I've kind of taken my power back, and I said, listen, that level of disrespect is just unacceptable, and we really need to talk about screen dependency. We really need to talk about what's actually going on. And I've confronted the personal attacks against me. I said, I'm not taking any more personal attacks. I'm not going to be taking any more abuse. If I mention something, it needs to be taken seriously. One of the things that they really want you to believe as a teacher is that you don't really have any worth or value. So if they can get you, and that's the students and the admin together, if they can, everybody can get you to agree that there's an algorithm out there, there's a piece of tech out there, even ChatGPT, DeepSeek, whatever, that they can write better lesson plans than you. So just use that, and then you just execute it. You're just a body, right? Just do what the tech says, and then your classes will be great. And I think that that's just very it's disrespectful. And I mean, the children, I don't really have confidence that they're going to learn that way. If that's the way that the leadership of education and the parents and everybody wants to go, that's fine. But do we really need to denigrate, humiliate, talk down to, and discuss the salaries of publicly constantly? Okay, teachers, like it's a dog whistle. And after a while, it's just kind of like embarrassing. And I think it's embarrassing more for everybody else. Like, I'm embarrassed for these students who decided that instead of getting that last little bit of education that they're entitled to, that last little bit that could push them that much closer to that job that's going to let them get that life that they want, that they think they're going to get by some stroke of virality, right? They don't get to have that because the adults in the room and the tech companies are playing these games that are serious with these children's lives and also with their teachers, because it's not nice to be, the public scapegoat for the mismanagement of the education of these children. When you have teachers who have been saying over and over and over again what we're noticing, and all you hear behind their words is a sitcom laugh track, that devaluing all of that, the subordination of it. We don't want to respect teachers. It's this, and then they're like, you got this. And then they're like, teachers are heroes. And you're like, what? Am I a hero? Or could anybody do it? Which one is it? I think society needs to kind of decide what they really want to do when it comes to public education. And I think that just kind of waiting for somebody else to save everything, it's not productive. And we see all of the scores going down. I'm confident. The reason I'm confident is because all of the scores are going down, right? As the tech goes up. So the tech goes up, but the scores go down. Maybe you need the teachers.
Absolutely. So I'm kind of curious. I know that there's been a lot of talk about like standards-based grading or teachers feeling like they have to pass everybody. In your experience, have students stopped turning in work? Do they turn in subpar work? Is it kind of haphazard? How does that end up working with grades?
Oh my goodness. What has happened? So the level of work that is being deemed as acceptable is not very high at all. The academics are startlingly low. Startlingly low. And I think there's a huge amount of blame, but it's the devices. For me in my classrooms, it's been devices. So if I say to the student, you can't learn this way, it's not going to work out. Let's say, for example, I had one student that had very big headphones on constantly. And one of the things that I've told them is that, it's not proper etiquette when you enter a classroom to have your ears visibly blocked. So you have a student cohort that's coming into high school classrooms right now at the public school level. And this could just be my school. It could be other schools. Maybe it's not as many students, but I'm talking about severe cases here. So just know that I work with severe cases. So you come into the classroom, you have your ears blocked, your eyes are on your phone, and should the teacher ask you to engage, to open your ears and to give attention to the lesson, you will be targeted and bullied. So I was told I got verbally assaulted just this year with a girl who really told me to be quiet in an impolite way, screaming and also threatening to get her family members involved. And it's because I was explaining something about how to print a linoleum cut block properly and just making some constructive criticisms about a piece that had some errors in it. And she lost her mind. And she thought she was defending her friend from constructive criticism. So that kind of sensitivity um, is not employable. And then to have it come back around to me as being the one that really isn't allowed to speak in my class. So I've come to a couple of conclusions. One is they really don't want me to teach. I don't think they want me to teach, right? They don't want me to talk. Um, they want me to put it on Google Classroom. They want me to have ChatGPT write the lesson. They want me to sit there, take attendance, and let the students work. And I understand that that's something that I think in their mind is education, but it's not in mine. And I don't think I want to be aligned with that pedagogy or that philosophy. So at this point, I'm kind of like, where is the group of people who want to educate children, the people who want to have their children educated, not the people who want to send their child to school so that they can go to work and they just do it and maybe I'm not sure. Like, do people trust that when their children go into the school system, they're getting an education, or do they not? And how do you build trust if you're tearing down your teacher's ability to have respect in the room in any way, to speak, to give feedback, to even engage in any kind of higher order thinking without a screen, without an app, without a curated playlist directly into the ear? We're talking about people who are constantly engaged with these devices as students, and the adults that are in the room are allowing it to happen. When I said to my fellow staff members there that I wasn't going to stop talking about this, that I wasn't going to put it away, that I wasn't going to just let it slide, that I want to work with people to help the students with screen dependency so that we can grow their attention spans and help them have academic success and maybe jobs in the future, because they need jobs. So that's what I want to work on. And I think that if somebody wants to come to me and tell me that I need to talk less, let them engage with screens more, then I'm good. That's not the place for me. And it's not the kind of product that I want to deliver to our students. I think that they deserve more. And I think that there's a certain kind of cultural laziness on the parts of the stakeholders that's embarrassing. I'm not embarrassed. I've been in the classroom. I've been helping your children, even when they have no idea how to be respectful. I go to work. I provide everything. I've got all of the certifications. And, how embarrassing is it that I would come to you and I would say, hey, I think your child is showing a sign of screen dependency that's negatively impacting their academics. And you come to me that there's something wrong with me for saying that. How dare I suggest that your child could be screen dependent?
I'm wondering if you think that teachers are at large demoralized right now, that they're just so beaten down and they're so tired of being gaslighted that they feel like there is no fight left because people don't listen and they get in trouble when they try to speak. Or do you feel like a lot of the teachers, there's kind of like a quiet buzz where there's an understanding between each other, like, oh, yeah, this is terrible, this isn't working, and at least we know it and we kind of talk about it? Which have you seen more?
I've seen teachers give me feedback, is this the hill you want to die on? Right? So they don't want to fight. And I think that that's demoralization. A demoralized person does not want to rock the boat. They don't want the waves. They're exhausted, right? They're getting abused. They're being abused. Okay. Now it might not be at every school, but if you're looking at a school that has a very lax phone policy that allows their students to keep headphones in, big headphones on, and have their phones and there's no program going on and they say it's up to the teacher's discretion, right? But you have a screen dependent child that if you're the teacher and you go in and you say, hey, I need to take that thing away that is helping you regulate your nervous system right now. So they leave you in the room to do that. That thing that you have is regulating your nervous system. You're dependent on it, but in order for you to learn this lesson, you actually have to put it down because it's taking your attention span away and you can't learn under those conditions. And that's just the reality of it. But what you get when you take an end user's supply away, you get a very, very aggressive response because they're chemically addicted to the device. If you think of the phones as a discipline model, then we're talking about confiscation, suspensions, detentions, things like that. You have to discipline the issue. If you think of it as addressing a screen dependency issue, we can take a therapeutic approach. If we take a therapeutic approach, we have to admit that the adults, the corporations, the schools, the parents allowed the children to be overtaken by social media and devices. We would have to admit it. We'd have to admit it and then decide as a collective to do something about it. Now, I've put this in writing in different testimonies and proposals, and I've delivered that to my district. Now, I don't know what they're going to do with it. I don't know if they're going to punish me, get rid of me, riff me, send me away, make my life horrible. But at this point, it's not the side of history that I'm going to agree with. It's not the pedagogy that I agree with. And at the end of the day, if I get punished for what I'm talking about with you here today, then that's not where I need to be. And that's what I think. I would love for this district to see my proposal, see what I've said about the therapeutic approach, to really think of a treatment plan for our screen dependent youngsters to get their attention spans going up and their ability to disengage from addictive devices to go down. We're talking about social media, but also the gaming platforms. So if we can work on that together instead of passing the buck and saying so and so uses it for music, kids like music, they're just going to listen to it. Can you do a game on the phone so that we can keep it in the room? All of these issues, they have to be top down. So when the governor says, okay, we want to have a ban, please tell us. Each district in New Jersey has to tell the governor by a specified time. I'm not exactly sure when it is, but they have to tell him what technology they're going to use to manage the device issues in the schools. So that's just another price tag. You have to buy a device management technology. I mean, if I was a principal, I'd get envelopes because envelopes are technically technology. But you know what I mean? You know it's real because there's a price tag on it. I believe the ban is coming because of that one sentence. But talking to other staff members, they're not so sure. They are not so sure. And it is not a pleasant conversation, and nobody would be happy to see phones stay. What I hear from my coworkers is, I just gave a riveting lesson about this thing that these students need to pass a state test on. And when I looked up, every single one of them was engaged in their own personal entertainment stream.
Wow. It is so crazy to me that's allowed. I left in 2021, and part of the reason that I ended up leaving is that I was so frustrated with the technology because they had to have their iPads, and then they had their online platform, which was Canvas, and we had like Google Classroom and all of these different things. And I would just, even with the ability to look at their iPads and shut them off, it was just like playing whack-a-mole all day. And then they would try to figure out how to block me from being able to see their screen. And then I'd be trying to figure like, how'd you do that? How'd you just disappear, off of my screen? And it was so annoying. I would break up people's little Google chat thing where they'd be like chatting each other. They would be Zooming or FaceTiming each other in class for other classes. It was just so out of control. And I just realized I felt like some kind of stand-up comedian, but with a really tough crowd because I was just standing there and talking and trying to be energetic and trying to like, use the vocabulary and use the screens and like push assignments out to them. And it was just like so much work. And then, like you said, I would look and I could clearly see that at least half the room was not with me. And at that point, 90% of my students were turning in absolutely nothing. And we were told, like, oh, of course, we're being understanding because it's such a hard time. But then we would have meetings berating us about the data and saying that we weren't committed to, like, the students' achievement if we weren't seeing scores go up. So it was just like this insanity all the time, where we're doing things that, like you said, it's like the complete opposite. Like the more technology we have, the lower the scores go. The more programs we purchase, the less kids do them, yet the teachers are still being blamed while simultaneously having their hands tied, while being gaslighted. It really is impossible. That's a
Well,
long way
yeah.
of saying.
No, you know what? Just about those scores. So again, it's upperclassmen that I'm dealing with, and they, are in a credit recovery program, and, graduation is significant, right? There's something happened. Who knows what happened? They need to recover some credit. They come through, and we have a program for them that is unique, that's personalized, that can help them on their way. And it's wonderful. It really is. But what I'm finding, and this could be in general population as well, but I don't think as much. So I think for this specific situation, I worked in a similar school where this specific situation happened, and this can happen with specific students as well. But what they will do is they will aim for the bare minimum. They will aim for the bare minimum, and for us, I think it's like a 64.8. So they want the 64.8, which already, if you have a child and that's your child and that's your student and that's your child, and that child has determined that they're going to aim for the 65, that's kind of sad, first of all. Okay, but I get it. School's obnoxious. School's a sitcom. School's boring. I just want to get out of here. And that's the reality. And some people do actually drop out prematurely. But what we want to do is keep them engaged so that they can be delivered the education that they're entitled to, that they're going to need to get good jobs. Because education exists so that people have some relevancy and some competitiveness in the job market once they graduate. So aiming for the 65, I understand that this is a score, but this is not that kind of game, right? The game is, how can I equip myself with a skill set that is going to give me an advantage so that I can survive? And I think that that is lost because there's this hypnosis and there's this joke that education is kind of like this little thing. It's just a little thing. And teachers are just these annoying people that said something negative about our paragraph, in our elementary school, and now we have a vendetta against teachers forever. Probably still don't indent, but, so if we have a student that's aiming for the 65, sometimes they're badgering the teacher to give them a list of the exact assignments that they can do to hit their point value. They won't even try to calculate it themselves. And if you say that you're not going to give them this coded list so that they know the 5 assignments that would just get them to that mark and not have to do anything else, that kind of negotiation it's dark. It's a cheating tactic. It's not enlightened, and it's not in service of the student learning, that's for sure. And it does cause an ethical conundrum. I do not want to provide that, nor do I need to do the extra work to do that calculation. I mean, the student should have to really figure it out if they're going to manipulate that far. But that's what I'm talking about. There's a very big vibe of give me a grade. You're going to give me a grade. Did you give them a grade? What's the grade? I had a student who was submitting work that they had gotten off of Google, just pictures. They didn't do it. They didn't use the ruler. They didn't make the thing. They submitted me pictures. So I said, this student is cheating. They're submitting me pictures from Google. What do I do? They said, grade it as you would. So I'm giving it a 0 because it's plagiarism, but it's up to my discretion. That's the feedback that I got. And I think they would want me to put points on it because I think they just want me to pass the kids so that the number of students that they have passing goes up, which is cool. That looks good, right? The number of students passing goes up. That means the money we spent on the tech is worth it. It's working. People are graduating. They're graduating with national scores that are lower than they've ever been. So they're graduating low skilled. Graduating no longer matters, and that's not good. That's not good. It's not good for their bottom line to get a job if they're competing with other people who have gone on to get an associate's.
Yeah, I think I figured out pretty quickly in the education game that it is a game, and that's what's so sad because there's all the grade inflation, there's all of the intimidating teachers to pass kids that don't deserve it, there's the pressure from the parents, and so it's just an emperor's new clothes situation where everybody is supposed to just pretend. And then after the kid is out, I think the school and the powers that be are like, that's not my problem. They're getting their paycheck, they're getting their statistics and numbers that are made up and inflated to make themselves look good. And I think as long as that cycle, that little hamster wheel keeps going, they're okay with that. And I will say, I do think that there's societal problems that are so giant that are like filtering into schools. There is a huge burden on the school system because what do you do when you have, like you said, kids coming in that are addicted and act feral when their addiction is taken away? What do you do when you have all of these kids that are 3 to 5 years behind? Like, what do you do when you have all these kids that cannot, meet basic behavioral standards? I think at the school level, they're like, well, we can't fail everybody. We can't suspend everybody. We can't kick everybody out. So I think I don't want to like put it all on the schools because it is a society problem. It's a parenting problem. It's so big. But at the same time, I agree with what you've been saying that at least if schools are not responsible for speaking out, if teachers are not able to speak out and at least make the problem known, then when the crash comes, who knows, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, everybody's going to be saying like, where did this come from? How did this happen? And it's like, well, people have been trying to say something all of this time. But, I think the people that could do something don't want to hear it. So it is a big deal for sure.
It's funny because when you were saying, what do we do? What they're doing is they're evaluating the teachers.
Mm-hmm.
They are purchasing elaborate evaluation systems that amplify and double, quadruple the teacher's workload by having them upload all kinds of artifacts according to a myriad of different rubrics. And while they're doing this, that's a lot of the gaslighting is coming from that. One of the things that I'm interested in seeing, or at least giving voice to, is this idea. We do know that reading curriculum, they did file a lawsuit because this boxed curriculum wasn't as effective as it needed to be, and they had gotten rid of phonics. I'm wondering when the teacher evaluation system lawsuits should begin, because the way that teachers have been treated through these evaluation systems, the to your face, kind of degrading speech, and then the way that you have to work around all these convoluted rubrics to even see if you could slightly prove that you taught. My I'm not really buying it. I really am not. I think it's a portal. I think that it's a portal to get teacher data so that they can process it through some of their AI models. I think they're just stealing our talent and trying to make a robot to replace us. Whatever it is. I mean, that's a far-fetched sci-fi kind of thing. I don't really have a base for that. But when I do kind of think about it, I'm like, what is going on? You're not evaluating the student behavior. You let the student go out into the internet on their phone portal like the whole time. They got written up and you were like, why don't oh, the response I got was be softer on phones, which I was like, what? But what can I do? If you tell me to be softer on phones, if I say to you, this student has a very huge pair of headphones, they won't take it off, and you say back to me they're allowed to have them on, there's nothing I can do. And then you're going to evaluate me, you know? So it's not okay. And we've just been so discredited as teachers that for us to say, hey, you're treating us really poorly through these things that you're paying for and making us do like on a to keep this job, you know, which we went to college and were trained for. And you've disrespected us by making it very clear that we need to be permanently training, permanently evaluated under these metrics. What other individual is getting this much scrutiny in the schoolhouse? Because I don't see it happening with the students, because we have students that are being graduated that can't do these mathematics. They can't read extended periods of time or even grade levels above. So we're sending them out into the world with a faulty education, with erroneous ideas and concepts. And, you know, that has really bad outcomes. Like being unable to get a job, keep a job, have job growth, increase your earnings, that can cause all kinds of hardship and pain in the lives of these children. And we're sitting here allowing it to happen and just being awful to teachers through these evaluation systems that are almost torture devices with the amount of uncompensated extra work that you have to do to move the data that proves that you have taught from one app into another. And both apps were bought by the district, and they have to say we bought them for better outcomes and it was worth the cost. But if your scores are all the way down and your graduation rates are up, you're done. It's over. We know it's not right. So, my personal opinion, and one of the reasons why I don't feel too uncomfortable speaking about it, is I don't think I'm ever going to be told not to speak about it again. I mean, you could try to tell me not to speak about it, but why? I mean, what kind of abusive situation are we in that a teacher cannot speak to the harms that are happening at a hostile work environment?
I'm so glad you brought that up because I've thought that to myself many times, especially when I was in the classroom. I thought to myself, the only variable, so to speak, that they can control without fear is teachers, because we're dependent on paychecks. We're dependent on paying back our student loans. We're dependent on good references from them and not burning bridges. And so teachers, ironically, are the most vulnerable in this situation. And like you said, they are the ones that get beat up the worst and humiliated. And just the rhetoric, like you said, behind how everything gets blamed on teachers, that is exactly what they're doing. Because then they can infinitely justify the new programs, the new spending, the new programs that they change sometimes midway through the year. And they could just say, oh, well, research shows, data proves that, a highly competent teacher does XYZ. And since we're the ones that make the test, our data has proved that our teachers are only at 30%. We want to get them to 50% when they're the ones that are manipulating all the data to begin with. And it really is crazy. It is. I'm so glad you brought that up.
Yeah, I mean, it's not easy to be told by almost everyone that you're there to serve that, you're not that great, you know? And it's funny because I find that teachers are often in this situation where someone is trying to maybe humble them or take them down pegs or just want to get one over. There's like a projection upon a teacher as to what is acceptable in how we're allowed to treat them or act around them. The children that I currently serve are fine acting with me as they act with each other using language that I shouldn't be exposed to. These are 15, 16, 17, 18, 19-year-old. We're in a workplace. And this is something that I was saying about using the computers for your own entertainment when you're in the computer lab at school and trying to help them understand that this is theft. If you're in a workplace and you provided a computer and you're at work and you have half the screen watching a movie and the other half doing your work, you could get fired for that because it is theft. And that's the thing that when I say something like that, they look at me as though there's something wrong with me when I'm trying to coach them to sustain their future jobs so that they can understand what it's like. if I have a business and I have a computer and I'm paying for the internet and I have a certain bandwidth and I have an employee that's siphoning off bandwidth to entertain themselves, this is not going to be an employee that I'm going to want to keep around. So the habits that we're seeing these students engage in that we're taking so lightly and just kind of rolling our eyes and saying kids these days, they're being provided by the adults. So what's going on with the adults these days? And if you have teachers that are sitting there and saying, hey, this is a problem, I don't know, you can't even talk over the level of disrespect, senseless evaluations, all of these things. I would like to say something positive, though. We are in a situation, and there are going to be those moments where we do have some flow and some learning does get accomplished. And that, I guess, is the mustard seed that we need. The children deserve a better education and a better life, and the adults really need to help provide that instead of fighting amongst each other, stealing and underserving these kids and pushing them through. It's embarrassing, and it's probably not going to be legally sustainable for much longer, in my opinion. I don't know how it would be legally sustainable to continue graduating low scoring or failing students.
Yeah. So I'm kind of curious if you could if you could wave a magic wand and fix this phone situation, technology situation. What do you think are some of the steps that it would take to really deal with this massive problem that we have now?
Well, I thought good and hard about this. I had a situation where I was verbally assaulted by a student, and that sent me home for a minute. I needed to stay at home. I took some time off and I wrote a proposal for what I thought could be helpful. It was almost like a gift. You know, I said, what can I really do? I went to college. And I was like, well, I guess I can write. Of course, this writing did bring me into a meeting with people. And, she asked me at the time, she was like, I guess, why did you write this? And I said, well, I didn't really feel heard. So here's 10 pages, here's so you can hear this. So the proposal, what I said was, we need to accept the reality that these children are screen addicted. We are at the precipice of a very interesting time. The school that I work at is brand new. It was a multi-million-dollar huge project, and it's gorgeous and wonderful, and there's a lot of good that could happen there. I'm very excited and honored to be the first art teacher in that room at this new building. And I was very flattered and honored and excited to be working with the district. Now, I say was because they've kind of broken my heart a little bit. We'll see what happens. I did write them this proposal. I do feel that some of the reasons why I've suffered in my classroom here is because of amplification of student behaviors and dismissive. I've been talking about phones with my colleagues for 2 years and very dismissive feedback, but I'm serious all the time. So I wrote the whole proposal, and the reason that I wrote it was because I didn't feel heard. And what I said was, listen, we have an opportunity. We can do fresh research. We've seen a lot of phone bans be absolutely failed objectives. We need to take a different approach. We need to look at the addiction model, and we need to see if we can offer our students a more therapeutic approach. We could do research. We can test their attention spans before we start and then have different checkpoints along the way. So instead of arbitrary SGOs, we could focus our student growth objectives on growing attention spans, and we can use the arts. We can have an art power hour. So for 1 hour every single day, the phones go away, but not a total phone ban because they're addicted, and that's not going to lead to the best outcomes. Maybe just 1 hour, one class, we work it in. Not only do we let them have creativity and expression, but we teach them about the devices and how they're addictive and what they might be experiencing so that they can have autonomy and control over this process instead of a power struggle that just does not need to be happening. So And then we could extend the hour. So if the students, we'll find the students who, after the art power hour, those students who go back into their phones but go maybe harder, those are the ones that we would know are a little bit more dependent than a student who, after that hour, just kind of goes back to a regular usage schedule. We could then extend and try to grow from the art power hour, and then maybe we'll do it by discipline. So you'll do art, and then you'll also do social studies for 1 week without the phone. And then you'll do math for 1 week without the phone. This sounds absolutely silly and absurd because we don't believe that the phones are in the classroom. They are. So the reason why this makes sense is because we have to wean these screen dependent children off of the devices and then help them cope with the fact that they were addicted to an addicting algorithm. In that way, we can serve the children and maybe have a better opportunity to get phones more realistically managed in the schoolhouse without this disciplinary thing that leads to a power struggle that doesn't work, that nobody's comfortable with. So if we can take that therapeutic approach, do the research, doing nothing is not going to increase the scores. And if the scores don't go up and we keep graduating people, the school will collapse, in my opinion. Who's going to fund that? Who's going to vote for that? Who's going to want to have anything to do with that? It's an embarrassment. We need to be serving the students. We can't have teachers being bullied out of providing the free and equal public education that is an entitlement, for these children in the community, and it's there because it's a benefit. We know it's a benefit. You will have a whole bunch of people walk around saying that teachers have degrees and it's just a piece of paper. But at the end of the day, it's a piece of paper that everyone in the community definitely wants for their child, and they want it to be reflective of a certain skill set. And if it's not, then that's really bad.
So, Miss Ann, this has been such a good conversation. And I'm just curious, since you're still in the classroom, what is keeping you waking up every morning, turning off the alarm clock, driving into work? What is keeping you going in this climate?
I'm pretty sure I was called to teach. I'm pretty sure I have a calling to teach. I've been doing it for 14 years. I've had a non-traditional route. I've definitely gotten tenure before, but I've taught in vocational schools. I've taught in part-time programs. I've taught at traditional high schools. And I think what keeps me engaged is a true love of learning, but there's a real joy in helping somebody. It really is a service. And to see a student, a sad student, one that with low self-esteem, who doesn't believe in themselves, who's so hard on themselves. These are children. If I'm not in there teaching with them, they're alone, and maybe they want to fight against me. Maybe they don't like my methods or something like that. It takes a little while. Constructive criticism is difficult. Being the one to tell you, hey, you need to grow in this area just a little bit, that can be difficult for a student. But for them to understand that it's out of their best interest, and once they get engaged with that and get running, I've had students very grateful return to me and be very grateful for how I've helped them in their lives. And that's giving me goosebumps right now. That's not really replaceable, that experience. I might be able to get it in a different location. I'm not sure how my teaching career is going to evolve. I've been in the classroom now for 14 years. I said at the beginning of my career that I expected to stay in a high school classroom for about 15 years. It was just a thought that I had, but it stuck with me, that number. So I'm not really sure how my career is going to evolve. I'm not sure. But I think that it is. I think I'm going to stay in teaching. I'm going to stay in education. I think there's a calling and a purpose. I think I've had a lot of experiences and I bring a lot of value to any table. But I'm not sure if the classroom is where I need to be anymore. But that's not for me to decide. I have to see what each day brings, right? The proposal might be accepted, and then we could be working on a team to help these students, or it could be rejected, and I could be, released and looking for new digs. So I really don't know what the outcomes of these things are going to be, but I really do have a love of education. I got that from my grandmother. I believe education is the great equalizer. It's something nobody can ever take away from you. I think we are so lucky to be on this planet in this form, to see the beauty and the awe all around us. And education is a place where we get to understand where we are and make sense of it. It's just so thrilling because you get to really be engaged with the world instead of distracted from it. So I really do absolutely enjoy teaching. And I love it when I see a student release that harsh inner critic to the point where they can get over some kind of analysis paralysis and stop fighting and accept that they have something to learn and they can learn it and they should and they want to, and that there's a purpose for them. Some students are really struggling to kind of like find their real place, and you say, hey, well, maybe you don't have to find the place, but maybe you can just find that one path that might lead to the next right one. So we kind of do it together. I don't know. I don't see myself leaving education, but I don't know what the future holds.
Well, thank you so much. This has been really amazing and really inspiring. And I'm just grateful for teachers like you that are willing to speak the truth in spite of what might happen. Because we've all heard stories of kind of vindictive admin and, just silliness. But I do think that voice by voice, people are hearing, people are seeing, people are understanding what's going on in education. And I'm just grateful to have people like you that are willing to talk about it. And audience, thank you so much for watching. And if you have any questions, feel free to type them in the comment box. If you'd like to interview with me, you can email me at teachertherapytrish@gmail.com. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you guys next time. Bye, everybody.